Have you ever wondered why the ancient Egyptians worshipped the Nile as a god, yet trembled in terror at the sight of its floods? Right now, beneath the murky waters and centuries-old silt, lies not just history, but a true nightmare that science is only just beginning to understand. We're used to thinking of this river as the cradle of civilization, but what if I told you that this cradle could at any moment turn into a mass grave for millions of people? Today, I'll reveal 10 shocking secrets of the Nile, from rivers that turn to blood, to underwater ghost towns, and monsters that have hunted people for centuries in total darkness. And be sure to watch to the very end. The final fact won't just change your understanding of the Pharaohs' treasures, it will explain why the world's greatest river has begun the countdown to a global catastrophe that will touch us all. Imagine a morning on the banks of the world's greatest artery. You stand at the water's edge, expecting the familiar grey-blue sheen, but instead you see a thick, crimson sludge rolling toward your feet. This isn't a scene from a horror movie or a figment of the imagination of ancient scribes. It's a real phenomenon that has brought entire nations to their knees in terror. When we hear about water turning to blood, the biblical plagues of Egypt immediately come to mind. But science and history tell us that this nightmare has a very earthly, albeit no less terrifying, side. During certain periods, when the water level in the Nile fluctuates dramatically, the river turns a deep red. In ancient times, this was perceived as the wrath of the gods or a harbinger of the fall of an empire. In reality, the culprit is microscopic organisms and specific soil brought from the depths of Africa. During floods, the river washes away iron-rich red clays from the Ethiopian highlands. Mixing with the turbulent current, this suspended matter transforms the clear water into something resembling a fresh wound on the Earth's surface. But there's also a biological, more ominous explanation: red tides. This is the rapid proliferation of toxic algae, which not only discolors the water but also deprives it of oxygen. Fish float belly up, and a heavy, putrid odor emanates from the water. For the ancient Egyptians, whose lives depended 100% on the purity of the stream, this metamorphosis meant the end of the world. The water became undrinkable, and the stench spread for kilometers. We can only imagine the shock they experienced as they watched their source of nourishment transform into a dead, crimson stream. This phenomenon still reminds us how thin the line is between prosperity and chaos, and how easily nature can knock even the most powerful civilization off its feet. But if the bloody water is only a superficial mystery, the true horrors lie deep beneath the silt, in places where time stood still thousands of years ago. Let's move on to the next place. Imagine plunging into the murky waters of the Nile, where visibility is barely an arm's length, and suddenly your fingers touch not cold stone, but the top of a perfectly preserved column. Deep beneath layers of silt and centuries-old sediment, the river conceals what archaeologists call Egyptian Atlantis. This isn't just a legend. These are real cities, like Heraclion and Canopus, considered myths for 1,000 years until their discovery at the bottom in the late 20th century. These metropolises of the past were Egypt's main seaports, thriving ports filled with gold, Greek mercenaries, and opulent temples. How did they get there? The answer lies in the treachery of the river itself. The soil in the Nile Delta consists of loose sediments, and the combination of a powerful flood and an earthquake led to the liquefaction of the soil. Enormous stone buildings weighing hundreds of tons instantly turned into anchors, pulling entire neighborhoods into the abyss. Researchers working in these underwater crypts describe surreal scenes. Colossal 5-meter-tall statues of pharaohs lie on the seabed, surrounded by broken sarcophagi and gold coins their owners never spent. The most eerie thing about these finds is their state of preservation. The silt that engulfed the ruins over centuries acted as an ideal preservative, protecting the ancient wood and papyrus from the destructive effects of oxygen. Down there, in eternal darkness and cold, lie thousands of people who were unable to escape when the ground literally vanished from beneath their feet. Each new dive reveals shocking details: children's toys, abandoned jewelry, and ritual offerings frozen in time. But while archaeologists try to unravel the mysteries of the sunken streets, other inhabitants of the Nile remind us that the river may be not only a cemetery, but also the site of the strangest and most dangerous worship in history. Let's move on to the next place. Can you imagine a city where the most revered inhabitant is a 5-meter-long, scaly predator capable of snapping a man in half? In ancient Crocodilopolis, also known as Shedit, this wasn't the stuff of nightmares, it was everyday reality. Here, the Nile bestowed life not only through water, but also through fear. The main hero of this place was Seabed, a crocodile-headed deity who personified the river's ferocity. But the most shocking thing was how the people expressed their devotion. In the city's main temple, a living god, a sacred crocodile named Pharaohs, lived in luxury and bliss. Imagine the spectacle: a huge beast, its ears and paws adorned with gold rings and precious stones, lazily basking by the pool. No one feared it. It was fed the finest meat, treated to wine, and offered exquisite sweets. Priests carefully tended it, and pilgrims from all over Egypt flocked to the city to see this living embodiment of natural power. If a sacred crocodile died, it was mummified with the same honors as great pharaohs and buried in special underground labyrinths, which archaeologists continue to uncover to this day, uncovering thousands of crocodile mummies, from tiny hatchlings to gigantic specimens. However, this outward splendor concealed a darker side. The crocodile cult demanded unquestioning submission to the power of the river. It was believed that if a person was eaten by a crocodile, it was not a tragedy, but rather the supreme mercy of the god. Seabed had taken them. The families of the deceased sometimes even rejoiced at this fate. This fanatical worship of the predator created an atmosphere of strange, lingering horror, mingled with rapture, in Crocodilopolis. People lived side by side with the monsters, believing that as long as their scaly protector was well-fed, the Nile would be kind to them. But even such loyalty couldn't protect them from the fact that the very land beneath the river was preparing a global catastrophe capable of redrawing the map of the world. Let's move on to the next place. Imagine a force capable of tearing apart an entire continent like a sheet of paper. While tourists cruise serenely along the Nile, deep beneath its surface pulsates a tectonic wound known as the Great Rift. This is where the African plate is literally bursting at the seams, attempting to split into two parts, the Nubian and Somali. Here, the Nile acts not just as a river, but as a hostage to a gigantic geological fault that will one day transform this vastness into a new ocean. Shockingly, this process is happening right now, before our eyes. In some regions of Ethiopia and Kenya, the earth is already opening up, forming enormous cracks kilometers long. Scientists warn, the Great Rift Valley is a geological scar that will eventually engulf the Nile Valley. If the rift continues to widen at its current rate, in a few million years, the eastern part of Africa will break away, turning into a giant island, and the waters of the Indian Ocean will rush inland, forever wiping out the course of the greatest river on Earth. For humanity, this seems like an infinitely distant future, but for the planet, it's just a moment. This tectonic shift is already changing the hydrology of the Nile. Currents are shifting, new lakes are emerging, and old riverbeds are drying up. The river itself is forced to adapt to the constantly changing landscape, carving its way through rocks that are rising or falling under the influence of the mantle. We are accustomed to thinking of the Nile as an eternal symbol of stability, but in reality, it flows along the edge of an abyss that will one day completely change the face of our planet. But before the Great Rift is complete, we should look into the past and learn about the ghost of a river that was once even mightier than the Nile itself. Let's move on to the next fact. Imagine the endless sands of the Sahara, where for hundreds of kilometers there's nothing but the scorching sun and dead dunes. It's hard to believe, but deep beneath this golden shroud lies a ghost, the gigantic bed of an ancient river, which scientists have nicknamed the Yellow River or the Tamanrasset River. When the Sahara was a thriving garden, this colossal tributary of the Nile was comparable in power to the Amazon. It was thanks to this waterway that ancient civilizations could thrive where not even a scorpion could survive today, and that pyramid builders obtained resources from the most remote corners of the continent. A shocking discovery was made using radar satellites that literally pierced the sand to a depth of several meters. Beneath the dunes, the clear outlines of river valleys, tributaries, and lake basins were revealed. This vanished waterway was a vital organ for ancient Egypt. When the Sahara began to rapidly dry up about 5,000 years ago, This stream began to fade, forcing people to abandon their cities and retreat to the narrow, green strip of what is now the Nile. It was a great migration, caused by a climate catastrophe that turned paradise into hell. The most intriguing part of this mystery is that hidden beneath the sands, along the bed of this dead river, lie thousands of intact sites and perhaps entire settlements unknown to any history textbook. It's a veritable time capsule, buried beneath a thick layer of sand. Researchers believe that it was along the Yellow River that the first people to settle the Nile Valley migrated, bringing with them the technologies and beliefs that later formed the basis of the Pharaohs' greatness. We are accustomed to seeing the Nile as a solitary giant, but it was once part of a vast network, pulsing with life throughout North Africa. And while some tributaries disappeared into the sands, the river preferred to hide other secrets within its banks, guarding the peace of the most powerful women in history. Let's move on to the next fact. Imagine the rocky banks of Deir el-Bahari, where one of the most majestic temples in the world rises above the mirror-like surface of the Nile. It belongs to Hatshepsut, the woman who dared to wear a false beard and proclaim herself pharaoh. But did you know that for centuries, the river has held the dark secret of her disappearance from history? After her death, someone with maniacal cruelty attempted to erase the queen's very name from every wall and obelisk. And it was the Nile that became complicit in this massive digital erasure of antiquity. Shockingly, the enormous stone statues and bas-reliefs of Hatshepsut weren't simply smashed. They were methodically dumped into deep pits and the river's coastal silt, so that the water and mud would forever obscure the face of the illegitimate ruler. For a long time, it was believed that her mummy had been destroyed, her memory lost to time. The river served as the perfect hiding place. What falls into the Nile's embrace usually never returns. But archaeologists have discovered that the river not only hid evidence, it literally moved history. Due to the shifting course of the Nile, many buildings associated with Hatshepsut were flooded or buried under layers of river sand, which, ironically, saved them from complete destruction by vandals in later eras. The most eerie aspect of this story is the recent discoveries in hidden caves above the river. Bodies presumed missing for decades have been discovered there, including the restless spirit of the queen, whose name they attempted to drown in the waters of the Great River. It was as if the Nile was playing a game of cat and mouse with historians, sometimes revealing a piece of limestone with her profile at low tide, then concealing it again under the raging flood. This river remembers the triumph of a woman who ruled the world, and the betrayal of those who sought to consign her to oblivion. But if the secrets of the pharaohs are hidden in stone and sand, then the mystery of the source of this sacred water has cost the lives of hundreds of brave madmen. Let's move on to the next fact. Imagine a time when the center of Africa yawned like a vast blank space on world maps, and the words "Here be lions" were not a joke but a warning. For millennia, the greatest minds, from Herodotus to Napoleon, wrestled with one question: where does this endless water come from? This mystery gave rise to the legend of the Mountains of the Moon, a mythical snow-capped ridge in the heart of a hot continent that supposedly fed the river with its tears. The search for the source of the Nile became the bloodiest and most grueling race in the history of geographical discovery, becoming a veritable obsession for 19th century European explorers. The price paid for answering this question is shocking. The expeditions of Baker, Speke, Grant, and Livingstone resembled the treks of the doomed. Imagine hundreds of porters dying from malaria, sleeping sickness, and crocodile attacks. Scientists who, from exhaustion, lost their sight, the ability to walk, and even their minds. John Speke, the first to claim Lake Victoria as the source, returned to England a profound invalid, and his eternal rival, Richard Burton, accused him of lying for the rest of his life, claiming that the source lay even deeper. This feud ended tragically. Speke died under mysterious circumstances just before the decisive debate, giving rise to rumors of murder or suicide due to the overwhelming weight of the mystery. But the most astonishing thing is that even today, in the age of satellites, the debate about the true source of the Nile continues. Is it Lake Victoria? Or should we consider the source to be a tiny stream in the mountains of Burundi that flows into the Kagera River? The river seems to mock the human desire for precision, constantly eluding and hiding its roots in impenetrable swamps and misty forests, where water is born from the clouds. This centuries-long drama turned geography into a thriller, where every line drawn on the map was paid for in gold and blood. However, while people were searching for the river source, they almost missed the moment when human hubris decided to impose gigantic shackles on this flow. Let's move on to the next fact. Imagine a colossal wall of concrete and steel cutting the throat of the world's greatest river. We're talking about mega projects like the Aswan High Dam or Ethiopia's new Renaissance Dam. At first glance, they're a triumph of engineering, bringing light to millions of people. But if you look closely, they're an ecological time bomb, currently altering Africa's biological code. It's shocking that the Nile, which for thousands of years lived like a beating heart, has now been transformed into a stagnant ditch with an adjustable tap. The most dire consequence is the disappearance of the Nile silt. During floods, the river used to carry millions of tons of fertile black earth, which served as a natural fertilizer for the entire valley. Now this black gift is settling at the bottom of reservoirs, and Egypt's fields are rapidly depleted and becoming saline. The river is no longer naturally purified. Without the annual floods, the Nile Delta has literally begun to sink. Saltwater from the Mediterranean seeps into the soil, killing crops and turning once thriving gardens into a lifeless salt crust. This is the slow death of the cradle of civilization, which we created with our own hands. But there is also a political horror. The Nile's water is a resource for which countries are prepared to wage the first ever water war. If Ethiopia decides to fill its reservoirs too quickly, Egypt will be left without water, leading to a humanitarian catastrophe of unprecedented proportions. The river, which has always united nations, has become a pretext for mutual threats and the massing of troops at borders. We are accustomed to fearing mythical curses, but the real threat comes from the fact that man has decided to become master of the river, not realizing that the Nile is a living organism that abhors chains. And while politicians argue about cubic meters, creatures for whom humans are merely accidental prey continue to lurk in the river's murky depths. Let's move on to the next fact. Imagine sailing down the Nile at night. All around you is silence, broken only by the splashing of the water, but beneath the hull of your boat, a shadow several meters long glides. It's not a crocodile or a log. From the murky depths, the tiny eyes of a creature stare at you, a creature the locals fear more than the spirits of the desert. Meet the Nile catfish, or more precisely, its giant varieties, such as the Vundu catfish or the legendary electric catfish. These fish grow to the size of a full-grown man, and their reputation as man-eaters is no accident. It's not just their size that's shocking, but also their behavior. Unlike most fish, giant catfish are intelligent and extremely aggressive ambush hunters. There are documented accounts of these underwater monsters attacking people, dragging them to the bottom. Thanks to their monstrous strength and slippery body, escaping their grip is virtually impossible. Local fishermen tell terrifying stories of divers disappearing without a trace in places where the seabed is riddled with underwater caves, the favorite lairs of these giants. Inside these refuges, catfish can guard their territory for months, attacking anyone who disturbs their peace. But even more sinister is the Nile electric catfish. The ancient Egyptians called it the one who saved many, using its shocks to treat pain, but in the wild, a 350 to 450 volt electric shock can paralyze a person in a second. Imagine, you simply entered the water, received a powerful shock, and, losing consciousness, became an easy meal for jaws studded with hundreds of tiny, inward curved teeth. These fish are the true masters of the river bottom, hidden from view and biding their time in the eternal darkness of the silt. However, even their frightening presence pales in comparison to what has lured profit-seekers from all over the world to these waters for centuries. Let's move on to the next fact. Imagine a riverbed that, over thousands of years, has become a veritable safe, filled with treasures that even the most fortunate treasure hunters could never have dreamed of. Throughout Egyptian history, the Nile was a major transportation artery, carrying everything from granite obelisks to chests of gold bars and ritual offerings for the temples. And, of course, the river regularly collected its tribute. Thousands of ships sank during storms, floods, and wars, carrying away riches valued today in the billions of dollars. But what's shocking isn't the presence of gold itself, but why it still remains there, literally under the feet of local residents. Recovering the Pharaohs' treasures from the Nile bed is virtually impossible due to the human shield created by nature itself. First, there's the silt. Over millennia, the river deposited layers of sediment tens of meters thick. Any sunken ship would instantly be sucked into this viscous substance, becoming part of the riverbed. Searching for anything in such conditions is like trying to find a needle in a constantly growing and shifting haystack. Secondly, there's the current. The Nile possesses colossal power, and any disturbance to its structure at depth causes dangerous eddies that can instantly bury a diving team under a layer of sand and rocks. Furthermore, there's a legal curse. The Egyptian government strictly suppresses any private excavations in the riverbed, considering it a national treasure. But the most intriguing part of this mystery are rumors of golden barges that priests deliberately sunk in secret locations to hide relics from invaders. Ancient texts hint at underwater vaults that can only be accessed at a certain water level. The Nile remains the world's greatest cashless bank, holding in its murky embrace the answers to mysteries that could revolutionize our understanding of history. We've come a long way from bloody waters to golden sands, and now you know that this river is more than just a stream, but a living chronicle of our wildest dreams and deepest fears. This was the final stop on our journey through the mysteries of the Nile. I hope you found this experience truly captivating. This Nile story seems incredible, but facts are stubborn things. What do you think about these mysteries? Do you believe the river really can hold the curses of ancient kings, or is there a scientific explanation for everything? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to know which facts struck you the most. And don't forget to like it. It's the best support for our channel, which helps us uncover the planet's darkest secrets.